Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Renew. I'm Pastor Tony Cowan. Thanks for joining us, and let's get right to the point today. We're talking about Faith 101, how to develop and live a lifestyle of faith. And as we discovered yesterday, that our faith must be dependent on something bigger and stronger than us. And of course, there's nothing bigger and stronger than God Himself. There's nothing too hard, nothing impossible, nothing too difficult for Him. So when God becomes our support mechanism, holding up our faith, then our faith will not fail. And of course, God and His Word are inseparable. God and His Word are one. And there's one thing we need to settle down in our hearts, and that's the fact, the reality, that God is not a liar. He is always going to tell the truth, that God's Word is full of integrity. Now we're going to look at Hebrews chapter 6 today. Hebrews chapter 6. But on our way to Hebrews chapter 6, we're going to look at just a couple of verses real quick in summary in Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 3. Hebrews 1:3 says that God upholds all things by the word of His power. God upholds all things by the word of His power. So that means all the creation, the whole universe, is being upheld and held together because of the integrity of God's word. If God ever said something that was not true, if He ever told a lie, if He ever deceived us in any way, said something deceptive, then the whole universe, the whole creation would fly apart at the seams. So the fact that we can look down and still see that we're all put together, still together, even though sometimes we may feel like our life is coming apart, in reality it's not. The universe is being held together. That means that God's never told a lie, that God's never said anything that was not true, that He did not back up. Also in Hebrews chapter 4 verse 12, Hebrews 4 verse 12, it says that God's word is a living and a powerful thing. It's sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit. You know, God's word is full of life. It's full of His power. God stands behind His word, and God's word is a living thing. God's word is a powerful thing. It's not a dead letter. It is a living, powerful thing. And it's just as much alive today as when He spoke it. That's some things that we can build our faith on that can be the support mechanisms of our faith. Now let's go over, like I said, to Hebrews chapter 6. And these are some things that God said to Abraham. Abraham is our example of someone who received from God by faith, who lived a lifestyle of faith. That didn't mean he got to be a faith superman overnight. We see the mistakes he made along the way, but I'm telling you, he got it right at the end, and we're going to learn from his mistakes and see what he got right. But these are some powerful things here in Hebrews chapter 6 that we need to look at. Verse number 13 says, "For when God made a promise to Abraham," God made a promise. He said something to Abraham. He gave Abraham a word, didn't He? He said when God made a promise to Abraham, because He could swear by no one greater, He swore by Himself. Verse 14 saying, "Surely blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply you." Now notice that God said, and then He swore with an oath. Now God does not need to swear an oath in order to keep His word. God was going to keep His word. He was going to keep His promise to Abraham regardless. But so why did God say, why did He not only give Abraham a promise, but why did He swear an oath behind that promise? Because He wanted that to affect Abraham's faith. He wanted Abraham to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was willing and able to keep His word. So it goes on in verse number 15, it says, "And so after he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise." Verse 16, "For men indeed swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is for them an end of all dispute." So in other words, God looked around. You know, if you were to go to court, hopefully you don't have to, but if you were to take the witness stand, you'd have to place your right hand on the Bible, and you would swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. So you were swearing by a higher power, aren't you? But God looked around when He was going to swear the oath to Abraham, and He looked around, and He looked up, and there was no one greater or higher than Him. So He swore by Himself. Now I tell you, that is strong right there, the fact that He would swear by Himself. In other words, he's really saying, if I do not keep my word, sworn in an oath to Abraham, then I would have to destroy myself. I tell you, that is strong right there. But that is what this kind of swearing, this kind of oath, this is what's attached to this covenant oath that he's talking about right here. So we can see that God is going to keep his word, isn't he? Then it goes on in verse number 17. It says, thus God determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise. That would be us. That's not just Abraham. That's all of us. He said to the heirs of promise, the immutability. That means unchangeableness. The unchangeableness of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath. So in other words, he did that for our benefit, for our faith, not for his own benefit. Verse 18, that by two immutable, unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie. Notice, it is impossible for God to lie. It didn't say it's hard for God to lie. It says it is impossible for God to lie. God has never said anything in his word, never said anything that was not true, that did not come to pass. He said it is impossible for God to lie. We might have strong consolation who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope that is set before us. So our hope is built on God's word. And our faith is built on the hope that's built on God's word. So it goes on to say in verse 19, this hope we have as an anchor of the soul. In other words, it's a sure support mechanism underneath our hope, underneath our faith, that God is not going to lie. He's not going to tell us something that's not true. He's not going to go back on his word. He has already sworn an oath, and he has already backed it up with a covenant oath. And I tell you, that is good news today. That's something worth building your faith upon. Well, that's all the time I've got for today. Join us again tomorrow if you'd like additional resources and materials. Go to tonycowan.org. We'll see you tomorrow.